Why would God run away from a fight? It's a question I pondered as I thought about the next phase of Jesus' life, his escape to Egypt. King Herod had just ordered the death of every newborn male child up to 2 years old in one of the most horrific infanicides ever. So what could a poor carpenter, his wife, and newborn child do? Go up against King Herod and his armies? And why would God send them to Egypt, of all places?
If you think about it, Mary and Joseph were carrying the most powerful weapon in their arms. The newborn child was Jesus Christ, who spoke the world into existence and could speak Herod's armies out of existence. But at such an early age, Jesus could not speak. Jesus had not come into his own power yet. So all Joseph and Mary could do to save themselves from death was to run.
An angel of God came to Joseph and told him to go to Egypt. Joseph complied, and that action saved the Savior of the world.
In the first century, there were quite many Jews living in Egypt. By far, in Alexandria, that was one of the 3 biggest cities in the world and full of many from all countries and nations and religions, including huge group of Jews.
At that time, Egypt was the most powerful empire in the world. It was a multicultural crossroads for trade, so the Jews felt quite comfortable there. Plus, they felt an Old Testament kinship to the area. Stories of their dramatic escape from Egypt fueled their passion for God, his temple, and the laws they now live by.
I think the trip to Egypt set at a very early stage in his life that he would operate beyond the Jewish culture, that he would not just be the Messiah for the Jews only.
Jesus had this tendency to cross borders and speak to the Samaritan woman, how he included people from Cana in his teaching, how he didn't turn away the woman from Cana who came with a prayer request. This is just one of those, you begin to stack all of these up in the picture of a Messiah for the world.
I do think that God's course in taking him to Egypt, God's sovereign travel, so to speak, was preparing him for a much broader view of the world than if he had simply been raised in one small town in his home country.
Jesus spent his early formative years in Egypt, possibly from the age of 2 to maybe 6 or 7. The Bible isn't really clear. It says in Matthew 2:19 that they stayed in Egypt until Herod's death around 4 BC. Jesus could have seen the most spectacular sight that Egypt has to offer, the pyramids.
The pyramids signify the huge power of Egypt and how centralized it was. The pharaoh was considered to be a deity who would take all of his hundreds of thousands of people and put them into work to build something that would serve as a tomb for himself. So he was the only one who had connection with the deities, with the gods, and through him all what the gods sent to humanity in their eyes came. No private person had an access to God, only Pharaoh.
The Egyptians had monuments of death, and death was very much a preoccupation of the Egyptian culture. And so Jesus would have been thinking, look at these monuments, look at all of the effort and all of the riches it took to be buried.
The afterlife was a continuity of the life on earth. Whoever moved to the afterlife still needed something to dress, food to eat, games to play with, and so on. And we know that looking on the tomb of Tutankhamun with all the things he possessed in life, including his toys as a kid.
So this was, the pyramids were sort of a storage unit for all of their things.
The pyramid was a storage unit, first of all, for the body, so this cow would be able to come back to the body, and all the necessities, all their goods over there.
Later on, Jesus would say, don't store up treasures on earth. Store up treasures in heaven. To know that you couldn't take any of that because rust sets in and moth, and so all of it was ultimately degraded, and that had to inform later on his understanding of what was really valuable, what you really could take into the next world. And it wasn't any of the stuff in the pyramids.
One day Jesus would find himself in a tomb, but for him, it would only be temporary. A mere 3-day stop on the way to eternity.
So in this land of dead pharaohs, all of whom are still dead, arrives Jesus, who would one day rise again from the dead. No tomb would be able to hold him.